Good afternoon, boys and girls, and welcome back to reading. Not sure if you're watching this video first before math, but either way, welcome back to school. It is great to see all of you again and to be teaching you again. So here we're going to go. Now, we've already gone over plot elements, but because we've been on break for about a couple of weeks, it's important to review what the plot elements are to every story that we read. And it's really important that we understand what plot is, because that is how all stories are based on. Without plot, all the stories that all you boys and girls love, movies, television, graphic novels, chapter books, all those things need plot elements. So why don't we go ahead and get started. All right, really important to know that with every story needs all these five qualities. Okay. Now, every story really needs a plot, a theme, characters, setting, and a conflict. And if we are missing one or two of these, that's not going to make our story very interesting. Whatever type of story that you are either visually watching, listening to, or actually reading. So, all these are very important. Let's get right to it. What is a plot? So, plot concerns the organization of the main events of a work of fiction. Remember, boys and girls, fiction is make-believe. Most plots will trace some process of change in which characters are caught up in a conflict or a problem that is eventually resolved, fixed. So, basically, a plot to every story that you've probably ever watched or heard needs to have really important characters, and they have to face a certain challenge, and that challenge has to be resolved somehow. So that is what plot is. All right, now, boys and girls, we have already seen something very similar to this in way previous lessons before. But again, it is good review to go over this. We usually call this a plot mountain. So plot diagram, they are the exact same thing. So I'm going to be saying plot mountain more than plot diagram. Okay, so watching our little hiker come in with our little demonstration here. So with every plot mountain, we always start with the setting and character introduction. That is the most important thing that every story starts with your graphic novels, with your movies and televisions, and your books, everything. And I'm going to keep repeating myself because I cannot tell you how important plot is to every single story. So, and remember, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So, and then after we talk about the setting and character introduction, that is where the conflict comes in. And as you can see, the hiker is slowly going up this mountain, meaning the conflict or the struggle that the character is going to go through is building up, building until it gets to the top. That's the climax. Now remember, boys and girls, the climax is basically the tipping point of something crazy just happened. It's like, oh my gosh, how is the character going to get out of this? Or how is the character going to solve this? We don't know. And that is where, right after that, the falling action, which is where the character is slowly trying to figure out, okay, here's the problem. Let's try and fix it. Let's see if it works. And then it goes right into resolution. Now, boys and girls, some of you may not have heard that term before. Resolution is another way of saying conclusion, okay, or the end, basically. Resolution basically explains to the reader how the problem was solved, the conflict was solved, and what's going to happen at the very end. Just wrapping everything up in a nice little bow, okay? So that is our plot mountain. As our hiker's like, okay, and we're done. All right, now getting more into the descriptions. So setting and characters. This usually occurs at the beginning of a short story, not just short stories, but every story. Here, the characters are introduced. We also learn about the setting of the story. Now remember, boys and girls, the setting is where and when a story is taking place. This section also presents other facts necessary to understanding the story. So Facts like, what does the character look like? Are they tall? Are they short? Are they fat? Are they skinny? Are they even human? Are they animals? Are they mythical gods? Are they creatures? We don't know. We need to know this information before the story continues. Otherwise, we're going to be lost. We're not going to understand anything, and we're going to be not interested, and why bother, right? So this is where it is very important to understand characters and setting. Now, some of you might have heard of this term before, but some of you might have not. Either way, it is a good opportunity to review. Now, books, stories, and movies and television, they are given a certain point of view. Basically, who is telling the story? So, first person is where the story is being told through the main character's eyes. So, trying to think. You guys are probably too young for this book, but the Twilight series is told in the perspective of the main girl character, and what she sees and what she goes through and things like that. And in that story, the story is told using first person pronouns, which is they use I, me, we, or us a lot. And then third person. Third person is where the narrator is not a character in the story and just talks about the characters and what is happening in the story. They're not involved at all. So the narrator has a limited perspective and can only read one character's mind, feelings, and motive. So a perfect example of a third person is Harry Potter. Another one would be the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant. Stories like that. So the narrator is telling the story, whereas first person, the actual character is telling you the story. So that is the difference in the point of view of stories. And usually when it comes to folklore, which is what we've been studying, which is folk tales, fairy tales, myths, things like that, they're usually told in third person, someone outside of the actual events happening in the story. All right, conflict, problem in the middle, okay? Boys and girls, without conflict, there's no plot, and there's no plot, there's no reason to read or even watch the story, right? Exactly. Because it'd be boring and you'd rather do something else. So, it's really important that there is a conflict, some sort of struggle, some sort of problem that the character has to face that will eventually need to be resolved in the resolution. Our little hiker, because our little hiker is making his way up to the climax. Now, there are different types of conflict, as you can see. There are 4 different types. So, conflict is basically a struggle between 2 forces of the story, whether it be one character versus another character, a character versus nature, a character versus society, or a character versus themselves. So, to be more specific, character versus character. So let's take Harry Potter versus Voldemort. Those are 2 different characters, and they both have a problem. Voldemort wants to take over the world with wizardry, and Harry believes that that is not what needs to be solved. So 2 characters facing off, having suspense and tension. Another example, character versus nature. When characters have to fight against a force of nature that is out of their control. So especially the I Survived books, a lot of characters that are around your age had to face storms, really crazy storms. Like one was the what was it? There was like a hurricane they had to face. It was Pompeii, things like that. So that is one type of conflict. Another conflict, which is character versus society. Character has to fight against rules of society because society's rules are unkind and they're not fair. An example of that would be the Hunger Games, where Katniss Everdeen has to go against the Capitol and the Capitol's extreme rules to make sure society stays in their place. And then we have character versus self. So a character is dealing with an internal struggle. So they're going through a moral issue. And so a great example, as you can see, is Tom Sawyer. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is a really good book. I really do encourage you guys to read it if you ever get the chance. And Tom Sawyer is faced that he doesn't know if he feels comfortable going to court to go against Injun Joe. So, if you want to find out more information about that, you'll have to read the book. All right. So, those are the different types of conflicts. And then, obviously, resolution, basically the end of our story. How is it solved? How is it solved? So, very simple. And our hiker is on its merry way. Okay. Now, here we have an example of how a plot mountain is organized, going from setting an introduction to conflict, climax, to resolution. Now, as you can see, we are using the example of the Three Little Pigs because, boys and girls, we've been working with the Three Little Pigs for several years now. If you haven't been working with it, that is okay, but it is a very common tale. I'm not going to tell you what kind of tale. That we are pretty much familiar with. Now, that being said, boys and girls, with everything that we have learned throughout the past few weeks, what is the Three Little Pigs? Is the Three Little Pigs a folk tale, a fairy tale, or a myth? What do you think? I'm going to take a moment to pause to have you think about this. All right, boys and girls, this is called a folk tale because folk tales use animals to tell morals of life. So, as you can see, we're going to go ahead, and as you're going to see, I'm going to go from the bottom left up to the right. So, we always start off with Three Little Pigs, with setting. The Three Little Pigs leave home to find adventure in the big world. And then, as you can see, we are numbering each event that happened throughout the story to show order. Because if things are out of order in a story, then we will get lost and we will not understand. So, event 1, the pigs come across a beautiful clearing they think will be a perfect spot to build their homes. Event 2, pig number 1 builds a house of straw, pig 2 builds a house of sticks, and pig 3 builds a house of bricks. Event 3, Big Bad Wolf blows straw house down and pig 1 escapes to pig house 2. Event 4, Big Bad Wolf blows the stick house down and pig 1 and 2 escape to pig number 3's house. Event 5, the Big Bad Wolf tries several times but he can't blow down the brick house. Wolf decides to sneak down the chimney to get to the pigs. That's the climax because, oh my goodness, we don't know what's going to happen after that. And then the falling action, Wolf falls into boiling pot of soup. The resolution. Notice the word, boys and girls. The Big Bad Wolf is so scared of the 3 pigs that he runs off in the woods, never to be seen again. The 3 little pigs live happily ever after. Now, boys and girls, notice how we went from event 1, 2, 3, and onward all the way to resolution. The story flowed. The organization helped you completely understand. If you've never read The Three Little Pigs, you know exactly what The Three Little Pigs is about because everything was written in order with a clear understanding of what the story was. So, boys and girls, it was really important to do this review before we get into today's lesson. So, starting with our learning target for today, our lesson begins with, I can demonstrate knowledge of distinguishing characters of well-known children's literatures such as legends. So, we've already learned about folk tales, we've already learned about fairy tales and myths. Now we are focusing on legends. As you can see, there is a picture right in front of you that has the title, The Legend of Robin Hood. Now, before I get into the exact definition of what a legend is, I want you to pause this video, take a moment, and just by looking at the poster of this book, what could a legend be? Just look at the title, look at the picture, and you figure out, what do you think a legend might be? Okay, hopefully you paused the video and you had enough time to kind of think about what you think a legend might be based on this picture. So now, here is the actual Examples and definition of what a legend is. So a legend, a traditional story based on truth, but that has had bits added in which have been passed on from person to person. So it's almost like a myth, but a little bit different. Okay? So, examples of legends is King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Robin Hood and Sherwood Forest, William Tell, Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Tombstone, and Arizona. So these are all legends based off of real people and real events. But some of their stories have been tweaked a little bit to make it a little bit more entertaining. So that is why this is a legend. So that's why those stories are legends and not myths. Because remember, myths is about gods and goddesses and how the world started. So legends may include all or some of the following characteristics. Make sure you're paying attention, boys and girls. So, traditional tales that originated from a specific culture and were told orally over time, meaning because not all stories were written, boys and girls. Stories were told by the word of mouth. Basically, there were specific people whose jobs were to tell stories from town to town as they travel. So that's how stories basically started, especially legends. Legends told as a matter of historical fact, but cannot be verified, believed to be true by the culture from which it originated. So, to be more specific, especially with King Arthur. Now, some of you might be familiar with the cartoon movie Quest for Camelot. That has a little bit of the story of King Arthur, just a little bit. But as you probably know, if you've ever seen the movie, there are a lot of things that are definitely not realistic. So, and obviously you know the Disney version of King Arthur, which is The Sword and the Stone. So you know that there are different legends and different ways of telling the story. So King Arthur was a real person, but the stories about him are a little bit tweaked for more of entertainment. Valuable meaning for the culture from which it originated, that's a legend. Heroes who perform great deeds with strength and intelligence. That's definitely King Arthur and Robin Hood. And then finally, explanations on how something came to be. So as you can see, legends is similar to myths, but not quite exactly. So that, boys and girls, is what a legend is. Now, boys and girls, it is your turn to go back into Schoology and complete the following assignment. You are going to be reading the legend of the Sword and the Stone, told in a different way. You're going to answer questions, and then you are going to be creating your own plot mountain of the story, The Sword and the Stone. So, boys and girls, it has been a pleasure to be, it is a pleasure to have taught you this afternoon. And remember, if you have any questions, please remember to join in with Mrs. Strasbaugh at the respected times. I will talk to you later. Bye.